This is real world good stuff. If you haven't figured out what you want to do yet, it's good to have options. I know you got your parents beating on you and all your relatives. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? You're not supposed to know that yet. What you're doing now is investigate options that you can do in the future so that you have a real good life. And aviation can help get you there. All right. I want to introduce you to the gentleman that started Shades. I want to call it Shades of Blue. Get it out of my head. Get it right. Shades of Blue. It is Shades of Blue. Keep changing it. 20 years ago, he started flying. 30 years ago, he was sitting out there like you, just wondering what to do. There was no organization to help him get there or anything else, but he has made it work, and now he's a retired pilot for United Airlines, and 20 years ago, he started Shades of Blue to reach out to help youth get to where he is. Please join me in welcoming Captain Willie Daniels.
Thank you for that gracious introduction, Mr. Dempsey. Wow. First of all, it's amazing sitting here looking at each and every one of you, being here this morning to learn a little bit about aviation and aerospace. What I'd like to do before we get started, I want you to give yourselves a big round of applause. Well, that was a mediocre round of applause. Let me hear you cheer. Yeah, that's what it's all about, because what you are doing here today, you are getting exposed to an opportunity in a career field that you may not have ever thought about, possibly being an airline pilot, a flight attendant, an aircraft mechanic and technician, a ramp service personnel, such as a technician that fuels the airplanes out at Denver International Airport. And we have a whole host of organizations around here, and I would first of all like to acknowledge all of those organizations. If you look over here to the left, you see the Space Foundation. Have any of you ever heard of the Space Foundation? How about a show of hands that heard? Just a few people. Well, I want you to know, just 2 weeks ago, they had an event down at the Broadmoor Hotel, which I participated in for that entire week. It was the National Space Symposium. They had over 14,000 people from all over the world to participate in that event at the National Space Symposium. And these are folks from aerospace industry, so these folks here have their fingers on the pulse of every major aerospace organization in the world. If that doesn't mean anything, what it means to you, how many of you have a cell phone? Wow. When I grew up, I had to walk around with nickels, dimes, and quarters in my pocket. If I needed to stop and make a phone call and call my mother and father, I had to find a phone booth. You might remember some of the old television shows with Superman in it. Superman would run across the street and find a phone booth to change his clothes and take off and go fly. Well, this organization here deals with space. We're going back to the moon. You just saw Victor Glover as one of the pilots. Victor Glover is heading to the moon on Artemis II. Victor Glover joined Shades of Blue back in 2005. That's a big deal. He is now on his way to be the pilot on Artemis II, going to the moon, and starting up a whole new series of space exploration, going to the moon, Mars, and beyond. That's your generation. So it's up to you to begin to prepare yourselves for that. We have other tables. We have Metropolitan State University. I'm an alumni of Metropolitan State. I graduated, I'm not going to say that. But they're back in the back, so we got to stop and see their tables. We got McNair Air way back in the back. They're a flight school. It's a great opportunity for if you guys want to learn how to fly airplanes, for those of you. And I understand everybody can't be a pilot, everybody doesn't want to be a pilot, but guess what? If you do, it's a rich, rewarding career. I started out with United 45 years ago. I came out of Southern California, Came over here to Metropolitan State University. I went there for about a year and a half and I graduated. And the next thing you know, I got picked up with United Airlines about a week before I marched in commencement. I was a professional pilot major. However, at the time, they were slowing down on pilots. So I ended up hiring on as a flight attendant for United. And I worked for about 8.5 years as a flight attendant before making the transition into flying as a pilot. Once I made that transition, I started out on Boeing 727s as a flight engineer. I worked that for about 3 to 5 years. I went over to our flight training center where I became a recruiter for United. I was a pilot. I did pilot new hire, and then I ended up working to, after that for 5 years, I transitioned over to the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. I went out and flew 10 and 11-day trips out in the Pacific. I did that for 3 years on the DC-10. I left there, I went to the 747-400, which is one of the most magnificent pieces of equipment ever built, made by the Boeing Aircraft Company, who is right over here to the right of us. That aircraft, when we take off and go into Sydney, Australia, weighed 875,000 pounds. We would put 388,000 pounds of fuel on board, and we would fly that aircraft at 600 miles an hour, almost 6,000 miles nonstop over water. And we did that. I would do that about 3 or 4 times a week. And then we turned out. So after I got off the 747, after 19 years, I went over and I flew the 777 aircraft at Boeing. I flew that as a captain for about 5 years. And then I transitioned from that and I went over to the 787 Dreamliner. But while I was a first officer on the aircraft, on the 747, people ask me all the time, why did you start Shades of Blue? And I'll tell you a quick little story. I was a first officer on the 400, and I flew a trip from LA over to Washington, DC. And we had a layover at the Hilton Hotel, the very same hotel that President Ronald Reagan was shot at. And I walked in the room about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I turned on a television program to CNN News, because at the time, CNN News, everywhere I went, was the main station in English, whether it was in Japan, China, or wherever. We always got CNN News and it was in English. But they happened to have a program on talking about prisons in America. At that point in time, they said we had in excess of 3 million people in prison on probation or on parole. And I said, wow. They said, we're building a prison every week. And no sooner than that last brick is laid, that prison was already saturated. And I knew, because I had done some statistics already, that at the time, 65% of that prison population was African American. And I said, wow, that's amazing. But yet African Americans are only 12% of the population. So I just kind of stuck that in the back of my head. And a few months later, I was doing a trip we call a W, fly from LA over to Tokyo, Japan, Tokyo to Honolulu, back to Tokyo, back to LA. That's what pilots like to do. I arrive in the morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I walk in the room, flip on the TV, getting ready to jump in the shower, and out the corner of my ear, I hear a message. Congress increases the number of foreign national visas to 58,000 visas. I said, 58,000 visas? Wow, what was that about? So I waited to hear this 30-minute rerun later to understand that because we did not have enough qualified people in our backyard to fill these positions, that we're missing out. We had to bring people in from around the world. So I flashed back to the scene of Washington, D.C. with the building of the prisons, and I said, wow, the light bulb popped on, that aha moment, where I realized that what we need to do is make our youth, which is you, part of the solution versus being part of the problem. And that's when we came back and we set in motion of developing Shades of Blue. As an aviation aerospace foundation, we created it with pilots, engineers, educators, and scientists. We have Mr. Al Gottman back there, who's one of the early recipients of Shades of Blue. So we visited many, many years ago, back in the early 2000s. One of his young students is a pilot now here at United Airlines many years later. These are the things that we are providing for you, the opportunities. So it's about having what we call options. As a pilot, if I'm flying out over the middle of the Pacific Ocean, something happens to my aircraft, I can't pull over to the side of the road and fix it. I have to rely on resources that are halfway around the world, and I'm communicating. So it's important to be able to communicate with people. It's important to work as a team and team members. It's important to respect each other and to be able to communicate effectively in order to get the job done that you're trying to accomplish. So we created Shades of Blue with that idea of being able to help you for your future, be able to give you an idea what this is all about and how you move from point A to B. So when I had you applaud, you guys are the first of a group of students that will be here and choosing a career choice. Sometimes you can look at it right now today. Now when you came in, you got a blue bag. How many of you looked in that bag and you saw one of these? Wow, I like that. Well, guess what? This is one of the first events that we've done here like this in Colorado. We have school districts from Littleton Public Schools, Aurora Public Schools, Denver Public Schools, Adams 12 5-star school district, Cherry Creek, and others all here today to learn a little bit about a new career that they may not have thought about. I was at a big event here at the Wings a few weeks ago, and one of the directors asked me the question, said, Willie, where are we going to get our future workforce? I'd like you all to take a look to your left and right and tell me what you see. You see yourselves, right? You guys are the future workforce. You're the future pilots, engineers, scientists, astronauts. You guys are the future. So it's time for you to become, how many of you are A students? How many of you are B students? How many of you are C students? How many D? How many Fs? Okay, well I always like to challenge the students. If you are A student and you have classmates that are C or D students, I want to challenge you to turn around and you reach out to your fellow student and help them increase their grade levels. Bring them up to your level. Bring them up to your skill set so that you'll have some people that as you travel throughout the course of your lives, that you will have individuals that you can relate to and they're speaking on your same level. And that's what the airline industry needs. We had a situation that occurred in December with a natural event. We had severe cold weather. I was out there at Denver International Airport and it was 25 below zero, snowing and stuff like that. And it created a lot of havoc amongst the airline industry. And many of you might have heard of, hey, we had cancellations left and right. But guess what? That was not only a technician problem, it was a manpower issue, the future manpower. And that's why we have all the representatives from the airlines here to show you what the different opportunities are about, whether it be a ramp service person, a fueler, a mechanic, tech ops, a flight attendant, a pilot, a manager. Managers, those are very, very important. So the thing is, I want you to start planning now today for your career. I gave you one of these patches because they're collector's patches. The very same gentleman that just made those patches for the astronauts that are going to be on Artemis 2 made those patches for us. Those are collector's patches. What a lot of the folks like to do is they take photos of this event and they'll go home and they'll have their parents or you frame it and you'll have a keepsake that you can pass on to your future generations. That I was at that event on May 1st at the Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum for the first Airline Symposium that they hosted here. So with that being said, I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you all for being here. I want to thank all of our supporters, United Airlines, Boeing, Denver International Airport, the FAA, all of the supporters have come out here to show you what this industry is all about. So thank you for being here. I hope you, if you pull out your notepads out of your packets, these are for you to take notes throughout the day. Make your contacts with the people. Remember their names, because these are the future people that can help you in your future. So thank you, and I'm going to turn the mic back over to Mr. Dempsey. Thank you.
It makes me look like I'm the guy that's giving the founder the hook. But we got to make sure you get the stuff. Now, he went through the grades. Grades are absolutely important because they give you options. If your grades aren't there yet, you still got time to improve on them, okay? Because I'm not standing up here saying, hey, I was on the Honor Society. Oh, no. My mother said my high school days would be my best days, so enjoy them and have fun. I did, so I got a C and got out of there. But you still have more options, and that's what the ball game is here.